Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
We hope all you guys are doing well.
Yes, always hoping you guys are doing better today than you were yesterday.
So there is an old saying, as above, so below, as within, so without.
And how true that is on so many levels. There's so many parallels to look at that through.
There is. And we just got done with a session with somebody for the first time. And I'm listening to Cindy and I'm thinking, most of the people in the world, if they were listening to, most of the people in the West, I should say, Western culture, if they were listening to what we're talking about, would think, kind of still a little bit out there, for the masses. But boy, have times changed. I remember when I was a kid and you talked about chakras, and probably 8 out of 10 people wouldn't know what a chakra was.
Well, when I heard the word chakra, because this was when I was in more of a mainstream religion, I equated that to something like evil, or I shouldn't mess with it, and it's just something that I should turn away from.
Yes, and as we've said, this is the philosophy of the controllers, to make us fear what reality really is, keep us in the dark, but yet, there's so much out there that gives us clues to what's really going on. One of the things that we see is the obvious fractal nature of this multiverse that we're in. You could see recurring patterns that we see in nature all around us. It's, representative, again, of the microcosm and the macrocosm. Mm-hmm. And again, the 5-pointed star is basically the microcosm, because it's basically depicting a human. It can be related as that. It can be related to the 4 elements with spirit above it, or chi, the akash, the ether. Whereas when we look at the 6-pointed star David, some might look at it and call it, and that's representing the macrocosm. And so there is a reflective nature to everything we see. And we've spoken about how, we've lost the divine feminine. We've lost that whole side of recognizing that each individual is just a cell in Gaia, in the planet itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, we look at ourselves and know that we are a host for all kinds of different beings. And guess what? Us ourselves are a host for a different being too.
Yeah, it's just the way the universe works. And you see the structures like the torus field. If we look at the energy field, the true energy field of the Earth, it'll be shaped like a torus. Same thing with the human energy field. Same thing with the galactic. Same thing with the universe. As above, so below. And you see this article out of Forbes, is the universe actually a fractal? Yeah, we see these recurring patterns. If you look at the stars in the sky, and we could look at a neural network, and it's reflective. So we see this, and what does that really point to? Well, another thing it points to is the holographic nature of the universe, because we're basically in some ways living in a simulation.
Mm-hmm. And in a reflection too. And it goes all the way down to even the foods that we eat. So if you look at like a walnut, it's shaped like the brain. Well, walnuts are really good for the brain, and it goes that way with food all the way down.
And I've done 2 or 3 videos on the Kybalion over the years, and it touches on the 7 Hermetic principles and Hermeticism, Kabbalah, these things that had to be hidden, because if you talked about them openly, anywhere in the Dark Ages and Middle Ages, there's a good chance you're going to be drawn and quartered, burned alive at the stake, declared a witch, or what have you. So that's why the knowledge had to go underground in the West. And unfortunately, in some cases, it's still deeply underground.
Well, yeah, because we have the controllers who are now controlling the underground information. So, yeah.
And so many people haven't been exposed to the mystery traditions in the West, or what's right out there in the East, in the very, very open and spoken of freely. Unfortunately, too, we see that the system that we're under has spread everywhere now. Rammstein did a song, "We're All Living in America," and soon we'll all be living in China.
I know, and weren't we trying to play that the other day, and it was banned in this country or something?
Yeah, a different song of theirs was banned. So there's different principles. There's 7 Hermetic principles. The principle of mentalism, the principle of correspondence, the principle of vibration, the principle of polarity, principle of rhythm, the principle of cause and effect, and there we could look at karma, basically. Principle of gender. And so I'm not going to go into huge detail here on this and go all through this. I just wanted to touch on this. And this is key. The all is mind. The universe is mental. Now that's the Kybalion, which again, this is an ancient text. And it's interesting that there was a group, the philosophical scientists, that used to get together for basically coffees and discussions, and included people like Einstein and Max Planck and many of the founders of quantum physics. And what was their modern day discovery of the universe? Exactly that. Thought is more real than a table. It's every bit as real as anything. The universe is, again, mind stuff.
Oh, yes, definitely. And it's really important to understand that thoughts are things. So whatever you're thinking, realize you're making a thing and you're sending it out into the universe.
Exactly. And so the ancients knew this. And when we look at how a baby develops, for instance, you could look at it and say, what an incredible miracle. It's interesting, too, as the baby kind of mimics the stages of evolution as we go and develop into what we are now and go through a period with different stages where it's reflective of, say, the reptilian side of things. When we look at cellular mitosis as well, where the cells divide, and at first, this fetus starts out as just basically one cell and then splits into 2, and then they split, and so on and so on. It is a miracle of life, and yet it's reflective on many other levels as well.
Indeed it is, and all we need to do is, we don't have to look too far to see it.
So going from a single cell into a multicellular organism. When we, think of things such as the term, the body of Christ, comes to mind. Becoming the bride of Christ in Christianity. What does that really mean? And, we're going to do videos delving deeper because there's been so many questions as far as, Christianity goes. And people have said, well, okay, so you believe there was a Yeshua who, most people know as Jesus, who was some sort of yogi teacher, great, being that had source within him, but you don't believe in traditional Christianity, what it posits as far as it being a blood sacrifice. You don't believe in transubstantiation, that we should be, if you're Catholic, like I was brought up, eating the blood and drinking the blood and eating the body of Christ. No, but we'll get deeper into it. Again, our thoughts is that he, and what we have gotten is that he was a great teacher, a great yogi, a great rabbi. Very much, what you would call an ascended master that is coming to earth to try to right the wrongs and get us back on the right path. So when we look at this, just again, think about this. One cell becomes many, right? We look at Agent Smith. Remember from The Matrix? How he was one being, and then he finds a way to replicate himself and become many. Now, they're all Agent Smith, but there was originally one Agent Smith that's now so many. It's, again, reflective as to consciousness itself.
Mm-hmm. It is. So, like we say, you don't have to look too far, but you do have to have an open mind to see this stuff.
It is said the incarnations of the Lord are innumerable, like rivulets flowing from an inexhaustible source of water. And, when we look to, like, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Upanishads, we go into the Vedas, and we see all the wisdom that comes out of the East. And, here they'll use the same term, Lord, but if you were to replace that with source, the incarnations of source, you can't count them. because source is in everything. You are an incarnation of source.
Absolutely. You're a unique expression of how source wanted to do things.
And so if we look back at Agent Smith and say there was an original, but there's so many more now. But if each one of them had just a little different characteristics, tendencies, perhaps this Agent Smith prefers Chinese and this one prefers Italian.
And that could very well be. He looks it too.
And this one loves the glasses and this one wants to ditch the glasses.
Indeed.
So it's the same thing with the incarnations that we see on the planet. And when we were talking about the cells dividing, it's the same thing with basically souls. We could look at it. And let's see, we'll go down the line. You see, you have source. And the closest that we could understand anything from source is like the archangel level. That's the closest level that we can understand, and see that's separate from source.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And it's kind of difficult to, understand this concept, but just kind of flow with it.
It is, and it's mind-blowing. Honestly, it's mind-blowing. Because we see as we go down, there's different advisors, guides. There's the oversoul. There's the source self. And there's the individual incarnation. And as you see, the source self can have multiple different incarnations that we're calling the learner. So you and I and Cindy, we're all basically learners. Now, when we meditate, and we get a glimpse of something bigger and we start pulling back, we start to become more aware of the source self. Aleister Crowley, who was definitely somebody that is controversial to say the least, he used to call it having conversations with his holy guardian angel. That's how he viewed the source self or higher self.
Right. And, what we all want to do is we want to understand our higher self more so that we can do what we came here to do.
Because the higher self, the source self, has a plan. Mm-hmm. There's things to be worked on. There's things to be achieved, goals to be achieved, lessons to be learned. And if we are coming into the body affected by others, affected by all sorts of external stimuli, to the point where we lose ourselves in it. We really lose ourselves. I was there too. And it took me until about 10 years ago, mid-40s, to figure out what I wanted to do. And, the client that we were working with today said, I'm still looking to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. And he's in his 40s. And so he's right in this middle period right now. And that's a lot of times that's when all of a sudden we'll be able to really get that glimpse of what the source self, the higher self, wants. It takes time to find ourselves. Like in the Hindu point of view, you're not an adult until you're pretty well developed.
Right. And sometimes we have little energetic blocks that get in the way of our self, and we keep missing the mark, so to speak. So when we remove those blocks, it puts us more at a straight line toward higher self, and then whatever we are supposed to learn in this lifetime moves into alignment.
And these diagrams, again, I have not found any that do it so well as Leah Maggie Garfield's book, How the Universe Works. And she's a Pomono shaman. And she also did another book, Companions in Spirit. I think the EEA family bought out all the copies of her book that were left. So probably going to be hard to find that. But here you see the oversoul, right, has emanations of source selves. And you can see multiple source selves. And then all these beings, these are all different lives that can be happening concurrently even. Like you might actually have one person here that was born in 1920 and died in 2000, and another co-being that was born in 1945 and died in 1995. And yet they're coming from the same source self. Again, the universe is mental. The universe is consciousness. This is the learning place and playground of, the true source of all.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's really important to understand our lessons and our purpose of this lifetime and not get too caught up in the 3D matrix.
So if you look here, you see this source or essence self, is having different incarnations in different years as different things. A beggar, a musician, a baker, a professor, a rabbi, a nun, a scholar, a courtesan, all these different years. These are all different experiences because, this is what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's all about experience.
It is. So sometimes when you meet somebody and you just feel like you're at one with them, like with Cindy, when I met her, it felt like we were sewn together permanently and we were just supposed to be together permanently. So it really could be with us, we are emanations from the same source self.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's something really interesting there for sure.
It is. It's fascinating. And again, this is reflective in the body. So what we were talking about with cellular mitosis, where the cells are splitting, it's the same thing with consciousness. So consciousness can split. And ultimately, if you go back through the line, it's one consciousness, but they're individuated.
Yes, they are. And, it does get complicated, but, here it is, as above, so below.
Right. So if we're looking at atoms and molecules and cells and organs and the body itself as we are going on up the line, you see there are shards, there are aspects, there are collectives, there are true energetic selves, source entities, and the origin. It's the same thing, and the shattered soul concept where we actually lose a piece of ourself is a reality too. It is a possibility.
Absolutely. Soul retrieval, very, very important process.
So the eternal self is just that. It's eternal. And as we see out of the Hindu tradition, it's indestructible. It can't be destroyed by fire or anything. It goes on forever. The self cannot be grasped with the senses, but which grasps with the senses. And I understand this could be something that's really perplexing for so many people. This is the beauty of going deep into the philosophies in the East, because it's not just telling you about who begat who and what things to do will get you in trouble and cause negative karmic effects or the wrath of God. No, it's a delving into what is consciousness. What is this multiverse? Who are we really? How do things work? It's just there is so much more to be grasped and learned, in my opinion, way more in the Eastern traditions and I've gone through the Bible head to toe so many times, and there's some golden nuggets in there. And then when we go into the Gnostic Gospels, things like that, there's some in there too. But there is so much more into just exactly what is mind, what is the self.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So it's just really interesting because here is like a user's manual for yourself.
Well, the thing is that what's hidden in the West, in the fundamentalist Western tradition, is the actual nature of the universe. Because, it's not explained that we have countless incarnations, and they don't even all occur on this planet. We have gotten from the guides that 60% of the people currently incarnated have only incarnated on Earth. 40% of the people incarnated on Earth right now are from elsewhere. They've lived lives elsewhere on other planets out there, perhaps even in other galaxies.
Right. And, they've come here as volunteers to help this awakening on the planet, which is a really beautiful thing. And that was pretty much you guys. Whoever is listening to this is asking questions like, why am I here? What am I doing? Well, you're here to help, just like we are.
A great yogi once said, the absolute truth is simultaneously, inconceivably divided and yet undivided. Is that not a paradox? Mm-hmm. In some ways. But when we, again, go back and look at like cellular mitosis And when we get to the point where there's 64 cells, are they not really one cell? Ultimately, they tie back to one cell. And this is consciousness too. So as we see these split, they become distinct beings in effect. They're distinct consciousnesses, yet they are part of a whole. And it's the same thing with us.
Right. So, I mean, it's just really important to understand that we are all one. So if we are hurting anybody, or if we're being dishonest, untrue, doing anything to try to undercut somebody else, understand you're doing that to yourself. And the more people that truly understand this and can learn to be better people, more, gentle, have more mercy, the more we can accomplish together.
So many ancient spiritual traditions refer to the Supreme Being as one undivided entity. When we ask what this means, we find at once that we're confronted with a paradox. So this means basically something that's beyond thought. Although the one is undivided, it also contains parts, including everything that exists. And that is the greatest secret and greatest truth of everything.
Mm-hmm. Indeed it is.
So it's fascinating. So the one and the many. And we had talked before briefly about how you could put your hands maybe a foot apart, 6 inches apart, foot apart, and just focus on drawing life force into that area between your hands. You could inhale in, drawing in life force through the chakras in the feet and also through the crown. Exhale, create a ball of pure life force, pure prana. And you could do things with that. You could give it a task to go and check in on your sister and then come back to you and report to you what it found. And it can do it. And now that might sound crazy to some people, or it might sound like black magic, something scary, but no, that's just something that any of us can do through our conscious intent. And when we look at some of the shamanistic traditions where people will go into a meditative state and put their consciousness into a bird, perhaps, and then guide the bird, give the bird the suggestion to go check in on my sister, and report back to me what you have found. That is something any of us can do. There's the ancient Hebrew tradition of the golem, where the statue is imbued with life force. And then it comes alive and causes havoc and creates karma on the person that lent it life by putting the life force in there in the first place. And that is true. So that is something to always keep in mind, that these things we can do. And, we can, for instance, I did have a statue of a gargoyle type, dog gargoyle type thing that I used to keep in my meditation room. And I basically charged it with the intention to be, for me, a watcher, and to, watch over and make sure nothing ever happened to the house or anything in it. And, actually we were in a good neighborhood, and we never locked the house once in 17 years, never had anybody ever break in or anything. But people, if you do something like that, you might have somebody come up to your house and with the idea of breaking in, and they're just going to get this feeling like they shouldn't, because you really could create a guardian, a watcher, a protector. It's something that all of us have the possibility of doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's just kind of how this universe works, with these little inklings that we get here and there, or little ideas that somebody might get and decide not to do something, or decide to do something and make your life just a little bit easier. Those are your guardians helping you out.
When we see some of the dark, nasty things that are out there, some of them are actually created, they're mental constructs. Created by the dark entities that we've been talking about, the Draco reptilians. They use techniques like that. They teach their young how to do things like that. Cindy's actually watched them in schools.
Right, they do. They go to schools. They know these things. They know how the mind works. They know exactly what thoughts are, how to form them, how to make them go out and do things and do their bidding. This is taught from, such a young age, just like we send our children preschool to learn ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. Well, they send their kids to school to learn how to do these things.
Exactly. This is part of how the universe works. We had talked about the Rougarou, right? Which is well, semi-mythical, what would you call it? A cryptid, it would be a modern term for it. And when you ask the natives what's a Rougarou, it's different than what the people that have come there from, say, Canada and France and the other settlers into the area. They view it as more like something like a werewolf, right? A dogman type being, maybe even something kind of belonging to the Bigfoot type of family. But if you ask the indigenous Native Americans, they'll tell you it's a shapeshifter. And it's also something that is perhaps more of a 4D being that can possess other beings, like, say, jump into a wolf and, have that wolf create havoc.
Right. And, these entities can do a lot of damage too. So you just want to make sure you're personally protected.
Exactly. So I hope this brings some clarity. And, as we had talked about before, when you look at, say, Vishnu, who is thought to be one of the Hindu trinity, of which there's really multiple trinities even, because there's the feminine counterpart. So, with Vishnu, and we have Lakshmi, and then you have Brahma and Sarasvati, and you have Shiva, and you have Parvati. So Vishnu is the preserver of the universe according to that tradition. But he's also had avatars. So he's been on Earth as Krishna and Rama. And now Krishna and Rama, they still have their own separate, distinct consciousnesses. They're separate entities, but yet they emanated from Vishnu. Just like when we were talking about Agent Smith. Agent Smith self-replicates himself into many other Agent Smiths. So it's the same thing. Again, it all boils back to that same axiom: as above, so below. As with the physical, so with the spiritual.
Yes, indeed. And, it is kind of laid right out there for us, plain and simple, but we're raised in a time where we're taught that it's not good to look into these things, or, it's, you might burn in hell forever. But it's time for us to wake up, start looking around and start understanding what is consciousness, what is this life about. It's time.
It is. So I hope you guys found this interesting and maybe productive, provoking. Yes. It's always fun to talk about these things and to go into greater depth. And there's so much more to cover in the future.
Indeed.
So make sure you are subscribed and have the bell clicked. Thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. And if you guys need to make an appointment, it's EEARTS at ProtonMail, evolutionaryenergyarts at Gmail. Cindy's going to give us a ding. It's been a while.
God bless and namaste.
God bless. Namaste, guys.